From the Department of Teachers Education, BSED 2 Black 2 proudly presents the different writers of literature of nationalism. Come and join as we explore their life and their works. This is the BSED 2 Black 2 production. And this is Literature of Nationalism Writers.
Good day, everyone. Today we will gonna tackle about the writer Fernando Maria Guerrero. So who is Fernando Maria Guerrero? He was a Spanish-Filipino poet, journalist, lawyer, politician, and polyglot who became a significant figure during the Philippines' golden period of Spanish literature, a period ranging from 1890 to the outbreak of World War II in 1940. He was born on May 30, 1873 and died on June 12, 1929. About nationalism. Guerrero was raised in a Spanish-speaking family. In 1914, he published his first poetry compilation, Chrysalidas.
His second poetry compilation, Aves y Flores, or Birds and Flowers, was published posthumously in 1970. As was popular in those days, Guerrero used pseudonyms in his writings, like Belisario Rosas. But most of his works remained unpublished for lack of patience nor solicitude to compile them, as stated in his autobiography. Guerrero's poems dealt mostly with patriotism. This is evident in Mi Patria, My Fatherland, from Chrysalidas, considered his most famous poem expressing his devotion to the country.
We have here Emilio Jacinto. Emilio Jacinto. When we talk about Philippine nationalism or literature of nationalism in the Philippines, it is most inevitable to come across in our mind the name Emilio Jacinto. Emilio Jacinto was born on December 15, 1875 on Trozo, Manila. And by the age of 18, he gave up his academic pursuit just to join the Katipunan. And on October 8, 1897, Emilio Jacinto was dubbed in the Philippine history as the brain and the soul of the Katipunan. And he also wrote A la Patria, or To the Fatherland. It is a piece essential to the Filipino. And also a Mi Ultimo Adios, or My Last Farewell, by Dr. Jose Rizal. Emilio Jacinto was inspired by Dr. Jose Rizal because of his writings. Emilio Jacinto was an equally cerebral and influential writer in his time. The pieces of his writings is exerted to the Filipino masses that they are going to be able to join the revolution against the Spanish colonizers or the Spanish conquistadors. That his writings is to prove or to show to the Filipino that they must have to learn to fight for their right and fight for their freedom and learn to sacrifice for the country. Emilio's famous literature was the Cartilla. The Cartilla is the primer of the Katipunan on how Katipuneros should conduct themselves in a fight for freedom against the Spanish colonizers. The writing style of Emilio Jacinto, which is the simplicity and the comprehension of its text, evoke the power of the Filipino to fight against their freedom, to fight for the freedom against the Spanish colonizers. Emilio Jacinto contracted malaria and died on April 16, 1899 at the age of 53. But Emilio Jacinto has a great contribution to the Philippine nationalism or literature of nationalism in the Philippines.
Country.
This is Father Jose Burgos, baptized as Jose Apolonio Burgos y Garcia. He was born in Vigan, Ilocosur on February 9, 1837 to a Spanish officer, Don Jose Tiburcio Burgos, and a Filipino mestiza mother named Florencia Garcia. He obtained 3 undergraduate degrees with honors, 2 master's degrees, and 2 doctorate degrees from the Colegio de San Juan de Letran and from the University of Santo Tomas. He conducted his first Mass in Intramuros. He was a Filipino Catholic priest accused of mutiny by the Spanish colonial authorities in the Philippines in the 19th century. He was placed in a mock trial and summarily executed in Manila, along with 2 other clergymen, Mariano Gomez and Jacinto Zamora, who are collectively known as the Gomborza. He died on February 17, 1872 at the age of 35. His famous work was La Luba Negra, also known as the Black Wolf in English. It was based on a historical incident, but it is a realistic novel in more than the historical element. Its realism derives from its factual reconstruction of society and its psychological analysis of motives. More significantly, its principal characters are of middle class in dialectical relationship with the established authority of the society. Its central theme too is inextricably involved with money. This novel tells about the tragic death of a woman who turned into a monster, praising an Aztec god because of the tragic death of her husband and son. It is a twisted plot because at the first part of the novel, Luisa and her family live in luxury. Her husband is the new Governor General of the Philippines and a well-respected man. Who would have thought that a fine lady that comes from a royal blood will turn out into a distorted woman? The essence of his famous work was nationalism.
Antonio Maria Regidor. Who is Antonio Maria Regidor? A Filipino revolutionary leader, lawyer, diplomat, and propagandist, born in Manila on April 16, 1845. Trivia: his image was put on a Philippine stamp in 1966. Regidor married an Irish woman named Julia Stanton. 3 children appear in data related to him, namely Visayas, Rosalina, and Josephine. Josephine accompanied him on his return to Manila in 1907. He died on December 28, 1910 at the age of 65 in Nice, France, before he could write a history of the Philippines as he had intended. His famous works: he expressed his political views in various writings and published in Spanish newspapers such as La Igualdad, La Discusión, El Imparcial, El Porvenir, El Liberal, El País, and La Bandera Española. Mission in Paris while the Treaty Paris of 1898 was being discussed and joined Felipe Agoncillo in the U.S. to work for American recognition of Philippine independence. He also contributed articles to Manila newspapers, El Comercio and El Diario de Manila. El Comercio is a Peruvian newspaper based in Lima and one of the oldest Spanish-language papers in the world. El Diario de Manila was a Spanish-language newspaper published in the Philippines, founded on October 11, 1848. Some of his famous works, he used pen names like El Teatro de los Filipinos and La Solidaridad for Luis B. Rances, and La Masoneria of Filipinas for Ingracio Vergara.
Walker Connor was born on June 19, 1926 in South Hadley, Massachusetts, and passed away last February 28, 2017 at Mount Holly, Vermont with the age of 90. He graduated in University of Massachusetts of Bachelor of Arts and got his PhD at Georgetown University. He was an employer at Middlebury College. Connor's occupation was a political scientist. Walker Connor was distinguished visiting professor of political science at Middlebury College at Vermont, USA. Connor is best known for his work in nationalism and is considered one of the founders of the interdisciplinary field of nationalism studies. The University of Nevada named him Distinguished American Humanist of 1991 to 1992. And the University of Vermont named Connor Distinguished American Political Scientist of 1997. Before the collapse of European communism that began in the late 1980s, nationalism was not a subject of significant academic study and was generally neglected, and Connor's work is another exception to this rule. And today, he is regarded as one of the scholars of nationalism and ethnic conflict who has contributed most towards establishing a conceptual grounding for the study of nationalism. Another significant theme in Connor's work is the passionate, non-rational character of nationalism when trying to understand national sentiment. He argues the key is not chronological or factual history, but sentient or felt history. And national identity is based on the emotional psychology of perceived kinship ties, a sense of a nation as fully extended family, and accordingly belongs to the realm of subconscious in non-rational. Finally, Connor is also well known for its analysis of Marxist-Leninist treatments of nationalism, which he deals with at length in this book, The National Question in Marxist-Leninist Theory and Strategy.
Don Juan de Aytaide is a Spaniard who was born in Manila in 1838 of a Filipino parents who had Spanish and Aztec blood. An intelligent, well-informed, and interesting conversationalist, Don Juan was supposed to have been such a quiet, punctilious, and affectionate gentleman that we could not think of him as a military man that he was. Given Aytaide's origins and profession, the problem of conflicting loyalties surfaced early enough in his life. In Madrid, La Pobrecesta, Aytaide spearheaded the establishment of Círculo Hispano-Filipino and its newspaper, La Revista del Círculo Hispano-Filipino, in 1882, in which Mrs. Lauretana notes had markedly liberal and reformist character. Here he also frequented the centers of liberalism, where he praised the triumphs of freedom of conscience and thought in America. In this, however, and everything else he did, he was always subject to military discipline and to the laws of honor, for he never took part in conspiracies or did anything against the public peace. Don Juan de Aytaide was not just an officer in Spanish infantry, but he was also devoted to poetry. In this regard, he was following the footsteps of Jose Vergara, the first poet who expressed his thoughts and sentiments in Spanish. With this, Don Juan de Aytaide was able to produce his work on Philippine theater entitled Los Teatros de Manila, a series of short personal essays first published in the illustrated weekly La Ilustración Filipina from the 21st of August 1892 to the 7th of September 1893. For the first time since their original date of publication, the essays are now reprinted, compiled, and translated into English to serve the needs of wider contemporary audience. This series of essays on the theater of Manila had contributed a lot into our theater history. First, The essays, aside from being Ataydes' principal contribution to scholarship, are the best example of his Filipinism and his zeal for studying and projecting the Filipino culture among his contemporaries. Second, and in macrocosm, Ataydes' essays are another important document for the reformist endeavor to prove to the Spaniards that the Philippines has a culture of its own, specifically a drama of its own, that was legitimate enough to merit the Filipinos' pride and of course the Spaniards' concession and important reforms. In this light, Ataydes' essays are best seen. Therefore, as an answer or sequel to Vicente Barantes' El Teatro Tagalo in 1889, which studied Tagalog theater for the purpose of proving that the Indio belonged to an inferior race. However, the significance of Ataydes' series as a document of both personal as well as politico-cultural concerns of his time and its importance of the contemporary theater and art historian qualify it as one of the most respected fruits of Ataydes' intelligence, an achievement in which, on every point, indispensable for those who wish to study in the subject matter.
Mr. Hanskan was born on September 15, 1891 in Prague from a bilingual Jewish family. His parents came from the Czech regions outside the Bohemian capital. Kahn was an American philosopher, historian, Zionist, activist, journalist, and a scholar of modern nationalism. He pioneered the academic study of nationalism and is considered to be the most influential theorist of nationalism. In 1910, upon his graduation from a German high school, and just before he was accepted as a student of law at Karl Ferdinand German University of Prague, Karl joined the Zionist Student Bar Kokhba Association, which until the outbreak of the World War I was the center of Zionist activity. He served as its chair from 1912 to 1913. In 1913, he edited a collection of essays that Von Judentum, to which prominent Jewish intellectuals for the German-speaking world contributed and constituted one of the most important manifestations of Jewish national thought in Central Europe at that time. Kahn also joined the Zionist movement in realizing that what awaited Zionists in Palestine would be the challenge of Arab nationalism rather than an underdeveloped feudal society. However, he left the Zionist movement in the aftermath of 1926 riots in Palestine, and he ultimately left Palestine. Though he never denied the significance of Zionist period of his life and remained loyal to his Jewish identity for the rest of his life. Kahn settled in the United States in the 1930s, where he quickly entered the academic world as an expert in nationalism studies. Initially, he lectured at the New School for Social Research in New York. He also served as a professor of modern history at Smith College in Northampton, Massachusetts. In 1949, he began to teach at City College, New York, from which he retired when he turned 70. Subsequently, he continued his academic work as a guest lecturer of various American universities. In the course of his academic activity in the United States, Kahn published dozens of studies of nationalism, of which the most famous in his book is The Idea of Nationalism, first published in 1944, in which he coined the typological dichotomy between the civic liberal Western nationalism and a more tribal-oriented Eastern form. This distinction is criticized for its simplicity, but this disapproval is no way undermines Kahn's stature as a pioneer of the history of nationalism as a discipline.
Alejo Carpentier. This is Alejo Carpentier. He was a Cuban novelist, essayist, and musicologist who greatly influenced Latin American literature during its famous boom period. Carpentier was born on December 26, 1904 in Lausanne, Switzerland. Carpentier grew up in Havana, Cuba, and despite his European European birthplace, he strongly self-identified as Covan throughout his life. Carpenter's notable works are War of Time, Reasons of State, Concerto Barocco, Explosion in Cathedral, The Lost Steps, The Kingdom of This World, Music in Cova, Journey Back to the Source, The Harp and the Shadow, and lastly, the Yule Lambda-O. Carpenter awarded an honors Cervantes Prize in 1977. Alejo Carpentier died on April 24, 1980 at the age of 75 in Paris, France.
Fernando Canon or Fernando Canon Faustino E. Alongo. He was known for being a Filipino revolutionary general, a poet, inventor, engineer, musician, and he is the Philippines' first national champion in chess during 1908. He was born on August 6, 1800s in Binyan, Laguna, and he died in July 18, 1938 at the age of 77. His other name, or his last Solidaridad pen name, was Q-Tip. The famous works of Fernando Canon. First was Alas Dalagas Malolenses. It was first published poem of Canon, appeared in 1889 in the newspaper of La Solidaridad. Next is Flor Ideal, or in English, Ideal Flower. It was published in the second issue of Cultura Filipina in May 1910. In the anthology, His Persano Filipino was published around 1923. Since Fernando Canon was the childhood friend of Jose Rizal, two of Canon's poems was dedicated to Rizal that became part of the book Poesías Dedicadas a Jose Rizal by the 1961 Philippine National Centennial Commission. Aside from poems, Fernando Canon also wrote essays. Those are Kundiman, Kurlapi, Kawit, a fire-resistant roofs for light materials, Ohm's law, and practical memories. These practical memories was based on his experience, where he remembers a beautiful vegetable garden that he discovered during his daily trips from Spain to Barcelona. So here is the picture of Fernando Canon.
This is Pedro Calderon de la Barca, was born on January 17, 1600s and died on May 25, 1681 at age of 81. A Spanish author, was a dramatist, poet, writer, and a highest of the Order of Santiago, primarily known for being one of the most distinguished Baroque writers of the Spanish Golden Age, especially for its theater. During certain periods of his life, he served as soldier and Roman Catholic priest. Born when the Spanish Golden Age theater was being defined by Lope de Vega, he developed it further, his work being regarded as the culmination of the Spanish Baroque theater. As such, he is regarded as one of Spanish's foremost dramatists and one of the finest playwrights of the world literature. Calderon matriculated at the University of Alcalá in 1614, but he transferred a year later to Salamanca, where he continued his studies in arts, law, and probably theology until 1619 and 1620. Thus, Calderon, as court dramatist, became associated with the rise of opera in Spain in 1648. He wrote El Jardín de la Falerena with alternating spoken and sung dialogue in 1660. He wrote his first opera, the one-act La Pórpora de la Rosa, with all of the dialogue set to music. This was followed by Celos de la Matan, an opera in 3 acts with music by Juan Hidalgo. As in the Italian tradition, the music was subordinate to the poetry, and all of Calderon's musical plays are poetic dramas in their own right. Calderon's greatest achievement as a craftsman, El Pintor de la Sol de Sonora, La Cisma de Inglaterra, are masterly examples of this technique, in which poetic imagery, characters, and actions are subtly interconnected by dominant symbols that elucidate the significance of the theme. Difficulties that Calderon's art presents to the modern reader have tended to obscure the originality of these themes. Accepting the conventions of the comedy of intrigue, the favorite form of the Spanish stage, he used them for a fundamentally serious purpose. La Dama Duende is neat lively example. In Cascardo's Puerta Mala is the Cuadrar, the intrigues of secret courtship and the disguises that traditional institution of woman in which these intrigues are based in shown to create social disorder by breeding enmity and endangering love and friendship. The worst is not always true, and silence is golden, mark the peak of this development. Although the conventions of comedy remain, the overtones are tragic. The critics who allege that he approves of the murder of an innocent wife because honor demands it overlook the fact that the horror of one feels at this deed is precisely what he intended.
Federico Garcia Lorca. Who is Federico Garcia Lorca? So let's now talk about his life, works, and history. Federico Garcia Lorca's full name is Federico del Sagrado Corazón de Jesus Garcia Lorca. Federico was born on June 5, 1898 in Fuente Vaqueros, a small town few miles west of Granada, southern. Notable works are Blood Wedding, The House of Bernarda Alba, Lament for the Death of Bullfighter, The Gypsy Ballads, Yerma, La Zapatera Prodigioso, Libro de Poemas, El Público, El Amor de Don Perlemcont, Melissa en su Jardín, El Poet in New York.
Lope de Vega. Who is Lope de Vega? So now let's talk about his life, work, and history. Lope de Vega's full name is Lope Felix de Vega Carpio, named by the Phoenix of Spain. He was born on November 25, 1562 in Madrid, Spain. Lope de Vega was the second son and the third child of Francisca Fernandez Flores and Felix de Vega. At the age of 5, he was already reading Latin and Spanish. And by his 10th birthday, he was translating Latin verse. He wrote his first play when he was 12. His notable works are Fuente Ovejona, The Dog in the Manger, Punishment Without Revenge, and The Knight from Olmedo.
This is Terso de Molina. His real name is Gabriel Teles, so Terso de Molina is just his pseudonym or pen name. He was born on March 24, 1579 at Madrid, Spain. The identity of the family of Terso de Molina and most of the facts about his life remains obscure. He has generally been classified with Lope de Vega and Pedro Calderon as a member of the triumvirate a foremost 70th century Spanish dramatist. Tirso de Molina died on March 12, 1648. He was known as one of the outstanding dramatists of the golden age of Spanish literature.
Ernest Gilmer is widely seen as the most important theorist in the study of nationalism. Gilmer was introduced to nationalism and identity politics during his youth. As a Jewish Czech, Gilmer was forced to leave his home in 1939, fleeing Prague for England in the wake of Hitler's takeover of Czechoslovakia. Upon his return to Prague after the war, he found a much-changed city that had lost the most of its multiculturalism. Not feeling at home, Gilmer went back to England to pursue an academic career. From his experience as an outsider, he developed his first thoughts on identity, politics, and nationalism. For Gilmer, nationalism is the imposition of a high culture or society replacing low cultures and most culturalism. His most prominent theory on the origin of nationalism starts by regarding the transformation of society from an agrarian-based economic and social structure to one centered around industrialism. For Gilmer, society before industrialism was vertically bound with the 80% of the population being peasant farmers. There were strict boundaries between communities as well as the between classes. This separates communities while bound under the state do not necessarily share common language, memories, myth, religion, or ancestry. Peasants were born as farmers and died as farmers with no possibilities of economic mobility or social advancement due to lack of a standardized education. Therefore, these communities did not wish to impose their language or culture on neighboring communities. There was also no imposition of a high culture due to a lack of a standardized education. According to Gilmer, this changes with the rise of industrialism. In industrial society, the barriers between communities are broken due to a standardized mass education which allows for economic and social mobility. Gilmer notes that industrialization does not spread evenly among of the communities within the state. Therefore, individuals in the community which industrialized later lack the opportunities that those in the already industrialized community.
On October 29, 1866, General Antonio Luna y Novicio Ancheta, known for Filipino journalist, musician, pharmacist, chemist, and the greatest Filipino strategist during the Filipino-American War, was born in Binondo, Manila. He was the youngest of 7 children of Joaquin Luna de San Pedro from Badug, Ilocos Norte, and Spanish mestiza Laureana Novicio Ancheta from Namakpakan, La Union. He initially studied at the Ateneo Municipal de Manila, where he received a Bachelor of Arts degree in 1881. He went on to study chemistry, music, and literature at the University of Santo Tomas. He acquired a licentiate at the Universidad de Barcelona and doctorate at the Universidad Central de Madrid in pharmacy. One of his published work is The Impressionist, where he used the pen name Taga-Ilo. The Impressionist by Antonio Luna is a collection of articles depicting Spain, the Spaniards, and their manners in a most critical, cursive, and sarcastic fashion.
In Cavite City history, on the 25th of September 1886, Dr. Pacifico Victoriano, national poet laureate in Spanish, Dr. Pacifico Victoriano was born in San Roque, Cavite on September 25, 1886. He founded and edited the first school organ, namely El Escolar. He also worked as a paid intern in Clinica Quezonjica, and was assigned as historian of the hospital. He finished his degree in medicine in 1909. In 1918, he continued his studies, learning to Bachelor of Laws in Jurisprudence. From 1903 to 1916, he taught at the Colegio de Entra Sierra del Rosario, Instituto Burgos, and Centro Escolar de las Señoritas. Eventually, he became the director of Liceo de Manila, where he was once a scholar. In 1934, he worked at the Philippine Senate as a corrector of style. He was also the corrector of style for the Constitutional Assembly, for the National Assembly, and later the House of Representatives. In 1902, he won his literary triumph in a literary contest in Ateneo de Manila for his poem on Rizal. In 1903, he won a golden pen encrusted with diamonds in the form of a lyre for his poems Immaculada. In 1904, he won a gold medal during the International Exposition in St. Louis for his journalistic work in the newspaper, namely La Patria. In 1906, he was proclaimed as a poet laureate for his poem on Don Quixote de la Mancha during the Certamen del Quixote. He won 350 pesos. In 1912, he won another award for his short stories. In 1933, he won the Premio Zubel together with Alejo Peca and Francisco Villanueva for his collection of poems entitled Arias de Primavera. Dr. Pacifico Victoriano died on May 13, 1953.
Eric Hobsbawm was born in 1917 in Alexandria, Egypt, and he spent his childhood mainly in Vienna and Berlin. Following the death of his parents and rise to power of Adolf Hitler, Hobsbawm moved to London with his adoptive family. After serving the Second World War, he obtained his PhD in history at the University of Cambridge. In 1998, he was appointed to the Order of the Companions of Honor. He was president of Birkbeck University of London from 2002 until he died. In 2003, he received the Balzan Prize for European History since 1900 for his brilliant analysis of the troubled history of 20th century Europe and for his ability to combine in-depth historical research with great literary talent. Famous artworks are The Age of Revolution, The Age of Capital, and The Age of Empire. The Age of Revolution in 1789 to 1848 is the name given to the period of history that saw large-scale revolutionary movements in Europe and American colonies from 1774 to 1849. Particularly important to the shape of our modern international system. The revolution of this period contributed to the replacement of absolutists. Monarchies with representative government grounded in written constitution of rights, as well as the construction of nation-states based around the ideas of shared culture and history. Without this revolution, the world would be far from different place. The next is the Age of Capital in 1848 to 1875. In this book, Eric Hobsbawm chronicles the events and trends that led to the triumph of private enterprise and its exponents in the years between 1848 and 1875. Along with Hobsbawm, other volumes, this book constitutes an intellectual key to the origin of the world in which we now live. The Age of Capital is most outstanding for its analysis of the trends that created the new order. With the swift and sophistication that have made him one of our greatest historians, Hobsbawm identifies this epoch winners and losers, its constitutions, ideologies, science, and religion. The next is The Age of Empire in 1875 to 1914. Is a book about the strange death of the 19th century.
Patriot by sentiment, a lawyer by profession, and a man of letters by avocation, Cecilio Apostol was a colossus in Spanish-Filipino poetry. He was recognized not only in the Philippines but also throughout the Hispanic world as the greatest Filipino epic poet writing in Spanish. According to Claro M. Recto, Apostol was the greatest writer of both prose and poetry. He was born in Santa Cruz, Manila on November 22, 1877, to C. P. Apostol and Marcelena de los Reyes. He began writing poems as early as when he was in 3rd grade. Aside from poetry, he loved art. At home and in school, he used to paint landscapes, flowers, birds, and people. After his elementary education, he enrolled at the Ateneo Municipal, where he obtained his Bachelor of Arts degree in 1894. He later took up law at the University of Santo Tomas. He also joined the editorial staff of the newspaper La Independencia and used either Catolo or Isagani as his free names. During his spare of time, he dedicated himself to poetry, painting, and linguistics. He learned several foreign languages, translated Bonifacio's Decalogue into French and the Elcano Epic Lamang into Spanish. Apostol's patriotic poem, Meroza, won first prize in the National Literary Contest, sponsored by the Club International in 1902. His poetic masterpiece, A Rizal, in English Eres to Rizal, is still unsurpassed in epic sweep and patriotic fire. The poems of Apostol have been compiled by Professor Jaime C. de Vera and published under the title Pentelicas. Included in this collection are La Ejaro Nacional, Mi Rosa a la Bandera, La Siesta, Sobre el Pento, Eres dedicated to Mabini, and El Solo de la Independencia. On September 17, 1938, Apostol died of cerebral hemorrhage at the age of 61 at his home in Caloocan. One of the work of Cecilio Apostol is the Al Hero Nacional, in English Eres to the National Hero. It is a poem that opened the world of Spanish poetry. It is also a dedication to the Filipino nationalists and polymath during the fiscal years of Spanish colonial reign of the Philippines.
Miguel de Cervantes was born near Madrid in September 29, 1547. Cervantes was an avid reader as a child, a skill he was reportedly taught by a relative. Later on, he became a novelist, playwright, and a poet.
His famous works that remarks the literary history is the Don Quixote. Cervantes published the first part of Don Quixote in 1605. This novel tells the story of an elderly man who becomes so enamored by the old stories of brave knights that he seeks out his own adventures. The title character soon gets lost in his own fantasy world.
So we have another writer, Mr. Apolinario Mabini. So Apolinario Mabini was born in Talaga, Tanawan, Batangas on July 22, 1864. He studied at Colegio de San Juan de Letran in 1881 and at the University of Santo Tomas, where he received the law degree in 1894. So Apolinario Mabini was a Filipino revolutionary leader, educator, lawyer and statesman who served first as a first legal and constitutional advisor to the revolutionary government, and then as the first Prime Minister of the Philippines. Apolinario Mabini formulated the principle of a democratic popular government, enjoying the historical struggles of the Filipino people with a coherent ideological orientation. So the work of Mabini towards literature of nationalism is the La Revolucion Filipina. It is a recent analysis and agent and cogent argument concerning the ideological implications of the revolution against Spain and the resistance to the American invaders. It reveals the progressive and democratic impulse behind his thinking. So what is the essence of Mabini's work? So the essence of Mabini's work shows the fight of conviction that our dignity and sense of duty require the sacrifice of defending our freedom as long as we could. Since without them, social equality between the dominant class and the native population would be impossible in practice, and perfect justice among us could possibly not be achieved. So the work of Mabini picture out the miseries of the Filipinos more movingly, so that the abuses and the afflictions they cause might be publicly revealed in the most vivid colors of reality. So Mabini achieved all this despite losing his legs to polio just prior to the Philippine Revolution. So this has made him one of the Philippines' most visually iconic national heroes, such that he is often referred to as the sublime paralytic, or in Tagalog, the Pilano po. So indeed, Apolinario Mabini was a selfless and a dedicated patriot. So that was a short biography of Mr. Apolinario Mabini and his famous works towards literature of nationalism. So I hope you learned something about it. Thank you.
Benito Pérez Galdós. Benito Pérez Galdós was the Spanish novelist and dramatist on 1843 to 1920. He is the best known for masterly treatment of the vast panorama of Spanish society in a series of historical and contemporary novels. Benito Pérez Galdós was born on May 10, 1843 in Las Palmas de Gran Canaria, Spain. He died on January 4, 1920 in Madrid at the age of 76. Due to a rigid upbringing, he developed into shy, quick-witted boy. He was very interested such as music, drama, and painting. He learned English from an American woman, whose illegitimate daughter, Cecita, was his first cousin and childhood love. Galdós' one of the most enduring remembrances concern his affection for Cecita and the brusque intervention of his mother, who sent away to Madrid in 1862 to study law. Galdós in Madrid was felt irresistibly drawn to a turmoil of city life and soon abandoned his university courses of capes, operas, theater, and long strolls through the street, intent upon understanding all classes and types of Spanish society. He frequented outlying districts, open-air markets, taverns, and tenement houses. By 1865, he had begun newspaper works. His articles and parliamentary stations in Las Cortes made that newspaper famous. Although Galdós was a perspicacious journalist, his ultimate aim was to give Spaniards not only a coherent picture of their daily lives, but also a vision of a new Spain reborn spiritually, culturally, and economically. He also believed that the best novels suited
this purpose. In 1867, Galdós went to Paris, rediscovered the novels of Honor de Balzac, and once back in Spain finished his first novel, namely La Sombra 1870 and La Fontana de Oro 1867 to 1868. So his notable works, namely Episodios Nationalis, Fortunata y Jacinta, and then La Fontana de Oro, and Novelas Españolas Contemporaries. That his notable works, and that would be all.
Carlton G.H. was born on May 16, 1882 at Acton, New York, and died on September 2, 1964 at the age of 82. He was an American historian, educator, diplomat, devout Catholic, and academic. A student of European history, he was leading and pioneering specialist on the study of nationalism. He was selected as the president of the American Historical Association over the opposition of the liberals, and the more explicit anti-Catholic was bias that defined the academic community of his era. He served as the United States ambassadors to Spain in World War II. Although he became under attack from the CEO, communists, and other forces on the left that rejected any dealings with Francoist Spain. He succeeded in his mission to keep Spain neutral during the war.
In June 19, 1861, Jose Protasio Rizal Mercado y Alonso Rialondo was born in Calamba, Laguna. He was a brilliant student who became proficient to multiple languages. Jose Rizal studied medicine in Manila. In 1882, he traveled to Spain to continue his medical degree. So while Jose Rizal was living in Europe, Jose Rizal wrote about the discrimination that accompanied Spain's colonial rule of his country. He returned to the Philippines in 1892 but was exiled due to his desire for reform. Although he supported peaceful change, Rizal was convicted of sedition and executed on December 30, 1896 at the age of 35. Jose Rizal have a lot of literary works, but I will just mention a few of his famous works that helped or contributed nationalism. So first is his poem entitled To the Filipino Youth. Rizal wrote this literary poem when he was still studying at the University of Santo Tomas. At the age of 18, this work is beaming with strong messages to convince the readers, the youth in particular, that they are or we are the hope of the nation. He also stresses the importance of education to one's future. Next literary work of Rizal was Noli Me Tangere, one of the most sought-after books in the Philippine literature until today. Is Rizal's famous novel entitled Noli Me Tangere, or in English, Touch Me Not. Driven by his undying love for his country, Rizal wrote the novel to expose the ills of the Philippine society during the Spanish colonial era. At that time, the Spaniards prohibited the Filipino from reading the controversial book because of the unlawful acts depicted in the novel. Yet they were not able to ban it completely, and as a more Filipino read the book, it opened their eyes to the truth that they were being manhandled by the friars. In this revolutionary book, you learn the story of Crisostomo Ibarra, how he dealt with Spanish authorities, and how he prepared for his revenge, as told in Rizal's second book, Il Filibusterismo. And last but not the least, one of his famous works includes Il Filibusterismo. This is Rizal's sequel to his first book, Nulime Tangere, in El Filibusterismo, or The Reign of the Greed. The novel exhibits a dark theme as opposed to the hopeful atmosphere in the first novel, in which it depicts the country's issues and how the protagonist attempts to reform. The story takes place 13 years after Noli Me Tangere, where revolutionary protagonist Crisostomo Ibarra is now under the guise of Simon, a wealthy jewelry tycoon. Because the novel also portrays the abuse, corruption, and discrimination of the Spaniards towards Filipinos, it was also banned in the country at that time. Rizal dedicated his second novel to Gomborza, the Filipino priest named Mariano Gomez, Jose Burgos, and Jacinto Zamora, who were executed on charges of subversion. Now, the question is, how does Rizal and his work relate to Philippine nationalism? Well, the answer is, his novels awaken Philippine nationalism. For him, the pen is mightier than the sword. And through his writings, he exposed the corruption and wrongdoings of government officials as well as the Spanish friars. As part of this reform, he even called for the inclusion of the Philippines to become a province of Spain.
Pedro A. Paterno. Pedro A. Paterno was born in Manila on February 27, 1857. They are 13 child and a youngest son of Maximo Molo Paterno and Carmen de Vera Ignacio. He belonged to a wealthy family. Pedro Paterno studied at Ateneo Municipal de Manila and graduated with a course of Bachelor in Arts in 1871. He went to Spain and studied at the University of Salamanca, which he graduated the course Philosophy and Theology. Then he transferred to the Central University of Madrid and finished his law degree in 1880. Pedro Paterno's greatest contribution to the country is that he was the mediator in the Pact of Biak-na-Bato on December 14, 1897, which led the peace agreement between the Spaniards and the Filipinos. He also helped the negotiation of the Pact of Biak-na-Bato on December 15, 1897, and after that, he wrote a book about it. Pedro Paterno also contributed a lot in Philippine literature, and one of his works is the El Cristianismo and La Artegua Civilization Tagalog, and it reached so much admiration and recognition. He also wrote the first Filipino collection of poems in Spanish, the Sampaguita y Pisteas Varias, or the Jasmine and Poems, and it published in Madrid on 1880. Pedro Paterno died of cholera on April 26, 1911 at the age of 53.
This is Lope Q. Santos. Lope Q. Santos was a writer, educator, lawyer, politician, and was known as the father of the Philippine national language and grammar. He was born in Pasig, a province of Manila, now a part of Metro Manila, as Lope Santos y Canseco to Ladislao Santos on September 25, 1879. Santos was sent to Escuela Normal Superior de Maestros, or Higher Normal School for Teachers for Education, and finished schooling at Colegio Filipino. He pursued law at Academia de la Jurisprudencia, then at Escuela Derecho de Manila, now Manila Law College Foundation, where he received Bachelor of Arts degree in 1912. In late 1900s, Santos started writing his own newspaper named Ang Kaliwanagan. This was also the time when socialism becomes the emerging idea in world ideology. In early 1910s, he started his campaign on promoting a national language for the Philippines, where he organized various symposia, lectures, and headed numerous departments for national language Philippine universities. In 1910, he was elected as governor of the province of Rizal under Nationalista Party. In 1918, he was appointed as the first Filipino governor of the newly resolved Nueva Vizcaya until 1920. Consequently, he was elected to the 5th Philippine legislature as senator of the 12th senatorial district, representing provinces having majority of non-Christian population. He was also the primary author of Philippine Legislature Act No. 2946, which enacted November 30 every year as Bonifacio Day, honoring Andres Bonifacio. Lope Key Santos have different fascinating works, and one of his famous works was the Banaag at Sikat, known as the Bible of working class Filipinos. The novel is about two friends, Delphine and Felipe. Delphine is a socialist, while Felipe advocates the works of an anarchist. As a socialist, Delphine believes and wishes to spread the principles of socialism to the public, where the citizens could have the right to all businesses, properties, and other national activities. Although he is poor who studies law and works as a writer for a newspaper, Delphine still strongly believes that a society inclined to the cause of the poor through peaceful means, a challenge that could have been achieved through violence. On the other hand, Felipe, who advocates anarchy, believes in a forceful way of destroying the existing powers and cruelty harbored by the rich landowners. He wants to dispel the abusive members of the society who rule society. Even though he is a son of a cruel and rich landowner, he hates the cruel ways of his father. He would rather see a society with equal rights and equal status for all its citizens, where there is no difference between poor and the rich classes. The novel Banaag at Sikat shows the different status of two individuals. And the theme of the novel is that even though he is poor, he or she shouldn't agree to be slave and be maltreated by the rich, and the rich should not oppress the weak.
Pedro Nolasco Cruz Vergara. Pedro Nolasco Cruz Vergara was born on April 18, 1857 at Molina, Chile. He was dead on November 11, 1939 at Santiago, Chile. Nationality, Chilean. Genre, literary critic and writer. Literary movement, literary critic and novelist. So he was the son of Nicolas de la Cruz Doñoso and Elisa Martinez de Vergara and Lois. She was the daughter of Pedro Nolasco Vergara Albano and Mercedes Vergara Lois. He had one sister, Elisa Vergara, whom he married in 1885 with Francisco Javier Sanchez Fresno. He was great-grandson of Vicente de la Cruz y Bahamonde, nephew and grandson of Nicolas de la Cruz y Bahamonde and Anselmo de la Cruz y Bahamonde. He married his first cousin, Susana Coria Vergara, January 10, 1862 to January 31, 1953. She was a great-daughter of Vicente Coria Albano, and Agustina Martinez de Vergara and Lois, who had 9 children. They were Fabio, Nicolas, Pedro, Nolasco, Susana, Elisa, Mercedes, Julia, Eduardo, and Manuel. Pedro Nolasco Cruz Vergara had the following well-known grandchildren, so namely, Alberto Cruz Covarrubias. He was an architect and Children Premio Nacional de Artes Plásticas in 1975. Eugenio Cruz Vargas, painter and poet. Fabio Cruz Prieto, he was an architect. He did his primary education of the College of Parents Escolapio Santiago de Chile. His secondary studies conducted in the College of the Sacred Heart of Santiago or College of the Friends Parents. Later, he was graduated as a lawyer in the Universidad de Chile in October 27, 1877. He was a literary critic and writer, ascribing in the field of analysis within the so-called Nationalism. He was the author of the novels Fantasias Humorísticas in 1881, Estaban 1883, The Passage of Venus 1884, and Flor de Campo 1886. Despite the success I obtained these works among his contemporaries, he is mainly remembered for his essays on Chilean literature. He was critic literary of newspaper El Independiente, La Unión, and El Diario Ilustrado until his death. In addition, he taught literature at the Universidad de Chile and College French Brothers. On the other hand, was Secretary of War and Navy in the period 1903 to 1913. Notary Public of Finance of Santiago between 1913 and 1939, and Secretary General of the Conservative Party from 1901 to 1928. He was the owner of the rank of the Molino on 1877 to 1939, and the Vina Antivero 1897 to 1939 in the Commune of Rome in the Department of San Fernando.
On April 4, 1868, Felipe Gonzalez Calderon y Roca, also known as Felipe G. Calderon, a Filipino lawyer, statesman, writer, a revolutionary leader, and intellectual, known as the father of Malola's Constitution. A constitution is the first Philippine Republic written by him together with Felipe Buencameno as an alternative to a pair of proposals to the Malolos Congress by Apolinario Mabini and Pedro Paterno. Calderon was born in Santa Cruz de Malabon, now Tanza, Cavite on April 4, 1868 to Jose Gonzalez Calderon and Manuela Roca. Felipe G. Calderon's works include Mis Memorias sobre la Revolución Filipina, which offers excellent information to historians, and The National Soul, which is all about the biographies of Bonifacio and of Luna.
Anthony D. Smith, also known as Anthony David Stephen Smith, was born on 23 September 1939 in London. He grew up in the lower middle-class Jewish family. His father, a Londoner of humble background and no formal education, became relatively successful businessman. His mother was originally from the middle-class German Jewish family of Wiesbaden. Nevertheless, both of his parents had strong family roots in Poland, and, as Smith later found out, more than 18 members of his wider family died in the Holocaust. Smith often emphasized the importance of this family history in his decision to study nationalism. He is one of the world's leading theorists of nationalism. He died on July 19, 2016 in London following a long struggle with incapacitating illness. Even though he spent much of his last 10 years in the prolonged visits to hospitals, he still managed to write several important books, including The Nation Made Real, Art and National Identity in Western Europe, Ethno-Symbolism and Nationalism, A Cultural Approach, and The Cultural Foundation of Nation, Hierarchy, Covenant, and Republic. Just before his death, he completed another manuscript of Nationalism and Music. Moreover, the personal encounters with anti-Semitism in the primary and secondary education of the post-World War II England made Smith very sensitive to issue of cultural and religious difference. Smith's strong interest in culture and religion was not only academic. He was very passionate and knowledgeable about art history, classical music, and the ancient civilization. This early experience influenced him for the rest of his life. There is no doubt that Smith will be remembered together with Ernest Gilner and Ben Anderson as one of the key scholars responsible for the establishment of contemporary academic field of nationalism studies. Smith, ethnicity, and nationhood were the cornerstones of most historical processes. Smith also built the organizational foundations of this research field. He has done more than anybody else in making the interdisciplinary field of nationalism studies a viable and highly vibrant endeavor. Smith has also contributed substantially towards shaping this research field with his influential typologies, taxonomies, and critical commentaries on the leading theories and theorists.
Hi everyone, this is Roshana Lopez Haina, a Filipino journalist, orator, reformist, and national hero who is well known for his newspaper La Solidaridad. Philippine historians regard Lopez Haina, along with Marcelo H. Del Pilar and Jose Rizal, as the triumvirate of Filipino propagandists. He is born on December 18, 1856, and died on January 20, 1896. His books are Graciano Lopez Haina, Speeches, Articles, and Letters, and his parents are Maria Jacoba Haina and Placido Lopez. He finished his studies in St. Vincent Ferrer Seminary and University of Valencia. Graciano Lopez Haina is a man that is well known and respected for a variety of achievements. Haina is recognized as being an integral part of the Philippine Revolution. This revolution, which is also known as the Tagalog War, helped to release the Philippines from Spanish rule. Graciano Lopez Haina helped to spur this revolution with his variety of literary works that helped to create the need and desire for independence. Haina, along with two other propagandists, are instrumental for their works with the Filipino people. So although Graciano Lopez Haina is considered to be one of the greatest orators in Filipino history, Haina was a man who came from a very humble beginnings. He was born into a poor family with a mother that worked as a seamstress and a father that worked as a repairman. His parents sent him away to study at a seminary where Haina aspired to become a doctor. Haina would attempt to pursue medical studies at a local university but was unfortunately denied admission because his current school did not offer a bachelor's degree. Haina was, however, able to obtain a position as an apprentice at the San Juan de Dios Hospital but was not able to keep it because his parents could no longer afford to send him to school. Jaina would later return home to practice medicine in the local communities. While practicing medicine, Jaina became very displeased with the quality of life that many of his patients had to endure. Jaina's displeasure with the injustices that many of his patients faced was the beginning of a new life for him in many ways.
So, my assigned writer is Salvador Ponce Lopez. So here is the image of Salvador Ponce Lopez. So, Salvador Ponce Lopez, he was born on May 11, 1911 and died on October 18, 1993 at the age of 82. He was born in Corimao, Ilocos Norte. He was a Philippine writer, a journalist, educator, diplomat, and last is statesman. He studied at the University of the Philippines and obtained a Bachelor of Arts degree in English in 1931 and a Master of Arts degree in philosophy in 1933. In 1940, he wrote an essay entitled The Literature and Society. It was published on 1941. He won the Commonwealth Literary Awards. In that essay book, it posted that art must have substance, that adherence to art per se is decadent. The essay provoked debates. The discussion centering on proletarian literature that engaged literature versus the orientation of literature as an art for the sake of art itself. In that book, it was postulated that Salvador Ponce Lopez has a great responsibility to our society.
Marcelo Hilario del Pilar y Gatmaitan was commonly known as Marcelo H. del Pilar and also known by his spin name Plaridel. He was a Filipino writer, a lawyer, journalist, and a Freemason. Del Pilar was born on August 30, 1850 in Cupang, now Barangay San Nicolas, Bulacan. He was baptized as Marcelo on September 4, 1850. Hilario was the original paternal surname of the family. Del Pilar's parents belonged to the Principalia. The family owned rice and sugarcane farms, fish ponds, and an animal-powered mill. His father, Julian Hilario del Pilar, was a well-known Tagalog speaker in their town. He was also a well-known Tagalog poet and a writer. On the other hand, Blasa Gatmaitan, Del Pilar's mother, was a descendants of the noble Gatmaitans. She was known as Doña Blasica. Del Pilar is one of the youngest of her 10 siblings. Del Pilar was entered in San Jose College and later on to the University of Santo Tomas, where he studied law. When Del Pilar was young, he played the violin and the piano well. He was a good conversationalist and entertainer. In February 1878, he married his cousin Marciana H. Del Pilar and lived in Tondo. They had 6 children, and later on he became a lawyer in the year 1881. Marcelo H. Del Pilar was a Philippine revolutionary propagandist and satirist. He tried to marshal the nationalist sentiment of the enlightened Filipino ilustrados or Borgois against Spanish imperialism. On August 1, 1882, he co-founded the Diaryong Tagalog, the first Philippine bilingual newspaper, Tagalog and Spanish, existed only from 3 to 5 months. He is also part and the author members of La Solidaridad. The Solidarity was an organization created in Spain on December 13, 1888, composed of Filipino liberals exiled in 1872. The organization aimed to increase Spanish awareness of the needs and of its colony, the Philippines, and to propagate a close relationship between the colony and Spain. For his essays, 150 and 66 editorials, mostly published in La Solidaridad, and various anti-friar pamphlets, Del Pilar is widely regarded as the father of Philippine journalism. Samahang Plaridel, an organization of veteran journalists and communicators, was founded in October 2003 to honor Del Pilar's ideal. Before he died of tuberculosis caused by hunger and innermost privation, Del Pilar rejected the assimilationist stand and began planning armed revolt. Del Pilar died in Barcelona on July 4, 1896.
John Hutchinson was an English theologian and natural philosopher. He was born at Spinnythorne, Yorkshire, and served as steward in several families of position, latterly in that of the Duke of Somerset, who ultimately obtained for him the post of riding purveyor to the master of the horse. In 1700s, he became acquainted with Dr. John Woodward, a physician to the Duke and author of a work entitled The Natural History of the Earth, to whom he entrusted a large number of fossils of his own collecting, along with a mass of manuscript notes, for arrangement and publication. A misunderstanding as to the manner in which this should be dealt with was the immediate occasion of the publication by Hutchinson in 1724 of Moses Principia Part 1, in which Woodward's natural history was bitterly ridiculed. His conduct with regard to the mineralogical specimens not obscurely characterized, and a refutation of the Newtonian doctrine of gravitation seriously attempted. It was followed by Part 2 in 1727 and by various other works, Moses San Principio in 1730, The Confusion of Tongues and Trinity of the Gentiles in 1731, Power Essential and Mechanical, or What Power Belongs to God and What to His Creatures, in which the design of Sir Isaac Newton and Dr. Samuel Clarke is laid open in 1732. Glory or Gravity in 1733, The Religion of Satan or Antichrist delineated in 1736. He thought that the Bible contained the elements not only of true religion, but also of all rational philosophy. He held that the Hebrew must be read without points, and his interpretation rested largely on fanciful symbolism. Bishop George Horn of Norwich was during some of his earlier years an avowed Hutchinsonian, and William Jones of Nayland continued to be so to the end of his life. A complete edition of his publications, edited by Robert Sparrman and Julius Bate, appeared in 1748. An abstract of this followed in 1753, and a supplement with Life by Sparrman prefixed in 1765. Moses Principia has been selected by scholars as being culturally important and is part of the knowledge base of civilization as we know it. This work was reproduced at the original artifact and remains as true to the original work as possible. This work is in the public domain in the United States of America and possibly other nations.
Karl Wolfgang Dratz was born on July 21, 1912. He was a social and political scientist from Prague. He was the Stanfield Professor of International Peace at Harvard University. From 1977 to 1987, he was the director of Wissenschaftszentrum, Berlin, which is an international institute for comparative social usage. His work focused on the study of war and peace, nationalism, cooperation, and communication. He is also well known for his interest in introducing quantitative methods and formal system analysis and model thinking into the field of political and social sciences, and is one of the best-known social scientists of 20th century. He was also ranked among the foremost social scientists of the post-World War II era. Few, if any, other thinkers in this field attained his level of intellectual originality, professional importance, and peer group recognition. One of his famous works is his seminal, The Nerves of Government, which revolutionized the study of politics by introducing concepts derived from cybernetics for a more nuanced analysis of essential political mechanisms such as power, authority, governance, cohesion, conflict, guidance, and breakdown. It was mainly at Yale that Yoch supervised the doctoral work of a large number of exceptional students, all of whom have since assumed prestigious posts at the world's leading universities, for they continue to uphold his intellectual legacy. He died because of cancer in Cambridge, Massachusetts on November 1, 1992. He has two daughters, Mary V. Edsel, a writer and the wife of Thomas Edsel, and Margaret D. Carroll, an art historian, and has three grandchildren, Alexandra Edsel, Sophia Carroll, and Samuel Carroll.